Hi, my name's Dan, and in this video I'm going to show you how to use a HUD, otherwise known as a heads-up display, in Unreal. So actually there are two ways of doing interfaces in Unreal, and the HUD is kind of, or the way I'm going to show you this in this one is kind of the old way, and there's a new way, which is using UMG, which is Unreal Motion Graphics, and I'm going to do a series of videos on that. But I'm also going to give you this one to show you the old way, which is actually relatively simple in comparison. I have a standard third-person template, nothing added and nothing different here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a HUD class and get it to do some displaying of stuff. So if you've been following on with these videos in sequence, you will have watched a video where I've been talking about some essential classes that Unreal uses. If not, I'll very quickly mention them. So I've opened the project settings, and within maps and modes here, there's a bunch of stuff here under the game mode where you can change particular aspects. And at the moment, this in the third-person template, it's using a standard HUD, and there's nothing in the standard HUD. It's just a parent class that you can inherit from. So we need to go away and do that, and then come back and plug it in here so that it knows which HUD to use. So I'll just minimize that. I'll go to the top of the content folder and do rubric class. And we don't want to inherit from actor, we want to be inheriting from HUD. So I need to hit that button there, and I'm going to type in HUD, and it brings up that as an option. And there we go, and I'm going to call it download. I'm going to open that for editing. So this has a viewport. I'm not entirely sure what would happen if I started to add visual components into this, but the place that we want to be is in the event graph. And there is an event which is draw HUD, which will be called every time Unreal wants to refresh the HUD. And inside this, we're going to just draw a simple text to the screen. Draw text. What I'm actually working towards is we're going to do a little bar on the screen, which is going to do a countdown to the end of the world, and when the world ends, the game ends. So fairly simple. So the asset that we're going to use here is one of the standard starting content assets, and I'm just looking for it visually. There's a checkerboard, like checker noise. Here we go. And I'm just going to stick on, just to start off with, screen 100. Screen 100. So it's going to be kind of top left. And width, I'm just going to again make that 100, and height 100. Right, so the next few parameters that it's asking for are UV coordinates, and these are, it wants you to say, it's how the texture is mapped across the square that I have described here from 100, 100 to, and it's using width and height, so, but it actually means that stretches to 200, 200. And so it's asking me for which bit of the texture do I want to be at the top left, and that's 0, 0. And then it's similarly is mapping this U width and the V height to the screen W and the screen H, and it wants to know effectively where in the texture I want to be mapped to the bottom right of this square that I'm describing, or this rectangle that I'm describing. And full width of the texture is 1, partial width of the texture is less than 1, and if I put in more than 1, it'll start repeating the texture across. And we'll just, we'll show that in a couple of ways. But we'll start with just doing 1, 1, which should give us the texture once across the screen. Got some added things down here, but I'm not going to bother with those, so I'm going to close that down. Right, and compile that. So that should just show this square up in the top left of the screen. And we're going to adapt that to make our countdown bar. This isn't going to display yet because I need to go back to the settings here, the project settings, and the maps and moods, and actually plug in that HUD. And when I hit that drop-down box, the fact that I've created a class that derives from the standard HUD class has now been recognized, and it becomes an option here. So I'm going to select that option, and let's play. And there it is, as if by magic it's appeared. Okay, so it's quite big. It's not kind of doing what we want yet, but we're going to work on that. And in fact, if all you wanted to do is to know how to plug in a HUD class, how to create a HUD class, then that's it. You can stop watching now. The rest of this video is just going to be about how to adapt that thing that's displayed on screen to make this countdown bar. Okay, so let's get back into that. So the first thing I'm going to show you there is I talked about this texture mapping, and just to prove what's going on there, I'm going to put 2 and 2 in there, and that should be giving us that texture at half size and then double across. There we go, more of a checkerboard. Yeah. But that's not what we wanted to look like. Actually, we want it to be a narrower bar, so its height is less, but it stretches further across. And the other thing is that I've been a bit naughty here because I've given it absolute screen coordinates, and this wouldn't work very well on different platforms. I know it's going to work on my machine and the resolution that I've got, but I should actually be more disciplined about this than this. So instead of saying we're going to start at 100, 100, we're going to use these bits of information here, which are in the Draw HUD event, which are size X and size Y, which are actually the width and the height of the screen in whatever device we're drawing it on. So I've messed about with these values previously, so there's nothing particularly magical about this. I just happen to know that if I start this by dividing the screen width by 22, then that's reasonable. So I'm going to put that into the screen X. So remember, this is the top left corner of the texture that I'm drawing. And I'm going to do the same for the Y. I'm going to just divide by 22. It's 22. And plug that into the screen Y. Okay. And I'm going to use that amount. Let's think about this. That amount again for the screen W. And we're going to do that. Well, the width is going to change. Let's deal with the height first. So I'm going to take the same amount again for the screen height. And what I'm going to do with the width is I'm going to take that 22 and I'm going to multiply it by 10 to give us the width across. Times. I'm going to integer times float here because it's expecting a float and it's doing automatic conversions, as you've probably noticed. So multiply by 10, and that can go on the screen W. Okay. Okay, so let's have a quick look at that and see how it's going. What we're hoping is that the bar kind of looks correct. I'm not bothered about the texture mapping right now. Yeah, so that could be a reasonable bar across there. So I'm going to go back and look at the texture mapping now. So back in we go. And instead of doing it twice over the height, we want it once over the height. And we're going to make it 10 times over the width, because that matches the fact that I've stretched this to kind of be 10 wide by 1 high. So I hope that works fine. And yes, that's a kind of nice checkerboard pattern. What we actually wanted to do is reduce over time, and we're going to make it reduce from the right-hand edge so that it pulls back towards the left-hand edge. So let's go back in to do that. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to have a variable which is going to be a countdown variable. And one of the reasons why I've been using this number 10 here is because it nicely fits with the idea of a 10-second timer. So I'm going to add a variable which is going to be called countdown, and it is going to be a floating point number, and if I compile, I can set a default value of 10 in there. And then we're going to do a fairly standard thing here, which is to make that countdown using the event tick. And it's going to, so every time it will take away the delta seconds. So the delta seconds is the time in seconds, which is always a small fraction, since the last frame, an event tick kicks off every frame. And this is a fairly standard thing to do, is to get a value, alter it, and then set the value again. So this is constantly updated. And the other thing I'm going to do is whilst I'm doing this bit, is I'm going to make it so that it quits the game when the counter is counted down to 0. So I'm going to check if it's less than or equal to 0. We'll do branch. And there's a really useful node for quitting the game. Just called quit game. There we go. So at the moment, this countdown is not affecting our texture, but I just want to check that it is doing the countdown and it will quit the game. So there we go. So the bars there, it's not moving because it's not yet dependent on this countdown variable. And I'm having to think of other things to say. There we are, it's quit out. Okay. Now let's use this and adapt the texture. So the first thing we want is the width to change dependent on this countdown. We've got, at the moment, we're multiplying this fraction of a width, which is a 22nd of a screen width, by 10 to get the width of this. So this was kind of conveniently set up by me so that we can just plug in that countdown variable in there. And let's run that and see. And so it's kind of shrinking. Now, it looks weird because the mapping of the texture across that bar is staying the same. It's still 10 times across. What we wanted to do is to make it look as if the end of it is disappearing rather than it shrinking. So we'll go back in, and instead of using texture U width 10 as a constant here, we're just going to use the countdown again. So that should give us the impression that it's disappearing from the right-hand edge, and the actual mapping of the texture will look as if it's constant across there. He says confidently. Let's give that a go and see what happens. Yes, it's doing exactly what I was hoping it would do. So I've used the texture UV mapping and making it match the width of the width of that bar. So as I said earlier, actually most of that towards the end was all about getting this texture working and getting this mapping right and the countdown and stuff. The actual process of creating a HUD and plugging it in is not complicated. But the problems that you have with a HUD done in this way is that it is either, I don't know if it's actually possible, but it's certainly not easy to make it interactive in such a way that a player can click on buttons or anything like that. So I'm going to do a short series of these videos about how to use UMG, sometimes known as widgets. So you can go looking for those. That's a more complicated prospect, but for now, that's it from me.